wasn't supposed to look inside that trash bag, but the moment he did, his entire life changed. Rain hit the ground like shattered glass, sharp, cold, and relentless. It wasn't just falling, it felt like punishment pouring from the sky. David Carter dragged the heavy garbage carts through the narrow alley behind the corporate tower. His shoes were soaked, his hoodie clung to his skin, and his rough, cracked hands gripped the metal handle tightly. It was past midnight, and exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. The city behind him still glowed with life, full of rushing cars, flickering lights, and people laughing in warm cafes. But back here, there was nothing but darkness and silence. Shadows stretched across the alley, swallowing everything whole. This was where people like David existed, unseen and forgotten. He paused, leaning against the cart, trying to catch his breath. His chest tightened, not from fatigue, but from something much deeper. Fear had become a permanent resident inside him, never giving him a moment of peace. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Its screen cracked and flickering. The battery was at 9%, barely holding on, but the wallpaper was still clear. A photo of Ethan, his son, smiling wide with a missing front tooth, holding a cheap plastic trophy. "Papa, I won second place." The memory echoed. That day had felt normal, full of warmth and pride, like life made sense. Now everything felt distant and broken, like a memory from another life. David locked the phone, his jaw tightening as emotion surged through him. "Just a little longer," he whispered under his breath. "Just hold on, Ethan." He pushed the cart forward again, forcing his body to keep moving. Dumpster after dumpster, his work became mechanical, lifeless, automatic. This was his second job, his second burden, his second fight for survival. During the day he lived in the hospital corridors filled with quiet despair. At night he cleaned up the messes of strangers who would never know his name. Sleep had become optional, something he couldn't afford anymore. Hope, on the other hand, was slipping away faster than he could hold on to it. The doctor's words replayed in his mind with cruel clarity. "Mr. Carting's son's condition is critical. Without the surgery he may not survive." David had nodded then, but inside he had completely shattered. How much time? He had asked, barely able to speak. The doctor hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. Weeks, maybe. That word weeks had become his nightmare. Time wasn't just passing, it was racing ahead, leaving him behind. Every second felt heavier than the last, like a countdown he couldn't stop. He reached the final section of the alley, where most workers refused to go. It wasn't because it was dirtier, but because it belonged to the top floor. The executive offices where power and money lived far above people like him. David looked up at the towering glass building stretching into the sky. Decisions were made up there that changed lives without a second thought. Down here, he cleaned what they threw away. A bitter smile crossed his face as he muttered, "Funny world." He approached the last dumpster, larger and strangely cleaner than the others. Someone once joked it was the CEO's trash, probably worth more than their salaries. David lifted the lid, expecting the usual stench, but it wasn't as bad. The trash bags inside were neat, organized, almost intentional. That alone felt wrong. He began pulling them out one by one, falling back into routine. Then, suddenly, he froze. A black duffel bag sat among the garbage, untouched and out of place. It wasn't torn, dirty, or damaged in any way. It simply didn't belong there. His heartbeat slowed for a moment, then began racing uncontrollably. "What is this doing here?" he whispered to himself. He looked around, scanning the empty alley. There were no guards, no visible cameras, just rain and silence. Slowly and carefully, he reached down and pulled the bag out. It was much heavier than he expected, forcing him to adjust his grip. His fingers trembled as he placed it on the wet ground. Water dripped from his sleeves and his breathing became shallow. "This is stupid. It's probably nothing," he muttered, trying to convince himself. But deep down he knew it wasn't nothing. He grabbed the zipper, hesitated, then pulled his hand back. "No, don't do it," he whispered, fear creeping in. Then Ethan's face flashed in his mind, weak, pale, surrounded by machines. "Papa, will I get better?" The memory hit him like a punch to the chest. "I have to," he said, his voice barely audible. He pulled the zipper open, and time seemed to stop. Inside were stacks upon stacks of neatly bundled cash, perfectly aligned, wrapped in bank bands, untouched. His breath disappeared as disbelief took over. "No, this can't be," he whispered, dropping to his knees. His hands hovered over the money like it might vanish. Slowly, he picked up a bundle, feeling its weight. Fresh, crisp, undeniably real. He flipped through it, his hand shaking uncontrollably. This is millions." The rain grew louder, or maybe it was his heartbeat. Everything around him faded, the alley, the cold, the world itself. Only one thought remained. Ethan can live. His son's laughter echoed in his mind, bright and full of life. Tears mixed with rain on his face as he clutched the money. This is the answer?" he whispered. But then another voice emerged, quiet and unforgiving. "This isn't yours." His grip loosened slightly as doubt crept in. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "You didn't earn this," the voice continued. "I don't care," he shot back under his breath. "This is stealing." His chest tightened painfully as he argued with himself. "I'm not stealing. I'm saving my son." The silence that followed was deafening. His thoughts clashed louder than the storm itself. He stared at the bag, then at his trembling hands. What kind of father would I be if I let him die? The question hung heavy in the air. It had no easy answer. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from inside the building. A door slammed, followed by approaching footsteps. Panic surged through him instantly. Someone was coming and he didn't have time to think. He zipped the bag shut quickly, his mind racing. Leave it, take it, run, hide. The choices collided in his head as the footsteps grew closer. Without thinking further, he grabbed the bag and lifted it. It was heavy, but adrenaline pushed him forward. "Think later. Move now," he muttered urgently. He pushed the cart aside and walked toward the alley exit. He tried not to run, tried to appear normal, but his pounding heart betrayed him completely. As he reached the corner, he stopped for just a second. He turned back and looked at the dumpster. "This changes everything," he whispered. Then he walked away, disappearing into the rain. Minutes later, he reached an empty bus stop under a flickering light. He placed the bag beside him and sat down slowly. His hands were still trembling. He opened the bag slightly, just enough to confirm it was real. The money was still there, untouched and waiting. "This is enough. More than enough," he whispered. For the first time in weeks, a spark of hope flickered inside him. But hope can be dangerous, because it makes you believe everything will be okay. And life doesn't always work that way. A car passed by slowly, its headlights cutting through the rain. David didn't notice it at all. But inside that car, someone was watching him closely. Back at the building, a security monitor flickered. The footage paused and zoomed in on a single moment. The moment David picked up the bag. The moment he walked away. A voice spoke softly in the darkness. "Interesting." At the bus stop, David wiped his face and took a deep breath. "I'm doing this for you, Ethan," he whispered. But deep inside, one question still lingered. At what cost? The bus arrived with a soft hiss. David picked up the bag and stepped inside without hesitation. The doors closed behind him, sealing his choice. He disappeared into the night, carrying more than just money. What he didn't know was the truth behind it. The money was never meant to be lost. And now, someone powerful was already coming for him. What would you do if your child's life depended on stolen money? Would you become a thief, or let your child die? The night felt longer than usual, heavier, like time itself refused to move. David Carter sat on the edge of his small, worn-out couch. The black duffel bag rested on the table in front of him, silent still, but it felt alive, like it was watching him, judging him. The dim, yellow bulb flickered above, casting long shadows across the room. Peeling paint, cracked walls, a place that had seen too many struggles and too little hope. David leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly, his eyes locked on the bag. "Just open it again," he whispered. "I need to be sure." But he didn't move, because he already knew what was inside wasn't the question anymore. It was what he was going to do with it. From the other room, a soft cough echoed. Weak, fragile. Ethan David's head snapped up. His heart tightened instantly. He stood and walked quickly toward the bedroom, each step heavier than the last. The door creaked open slowly. Ethan lay on the bed, small, too small, surrounded by things no child should ever be surrounded by. Medicine bottles, a half-empty glass of water, a thin blanket that did nothing to hide how fragile he had become. "Papa." Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. David forced a smile. "Hey champ, did I wake you?" Ethan shook his head slightly. "I had a dream." David sat beside him, gently brushing his hair back. "What kind of dream?" Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. "I was running really fast, faster than everyone." David felt something break inside his chest. "That's my boy," he said softly. "You always win." Ethan looked at him, eyes tired, but full of trust. "Papa, will I get better?" The same question, every time. David swallowed hard, his throat dry, his heart screaming, but his face, calm, gentle. "Of course you will," he said quietly. "I promise." Ethan nodded slowly, satisfied, because children believe promises, even when the world doesn't. "Good," Ethan whispered. "I want to go to school again. I miss my friends." David smiled faintly. "You will, very soon." Ethan's eyes slowly closed. His breathing softened to sleep again. David sat there for a long time, watching him, listening to every breath, counting them, because somewhere deep inside, he was afraid one might be the last. He stood up quietly, walked back into the living room. The bag was still there, waiting this time. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to it, sat down, and opened it fully. The money stared back at him, cold, perfect, unreal. He picked up a bundle, then another, then another. "This is enough," he whispered. "It's more than enough." His hands tightened around the cash. "I can save him." But then a thought crept in, slow, sharp. What if this money is marked? David froze. What if someone is looking for it? His breathing quickened. What if I get caught? He imagined it. Police, handcuffs, bars, Ethan Malone. No, he shook his head violently. I won't get caught. But doubt had already entered. And once doubt enters, it never leaves easily. He stood up, started pacing the room. "Think, David, think." His eyes landed on the phone. Hospital. He grabbed it, dialed halfway, stopped. What will I say? He imagined the conversation. I suddenly have $2 million. It sounded wrong. Impossible. Suspicious. He dropped the phone, ran his hands through his hair. There has to be another way. But there wasn't. Time was running out. And this was his only chance. Suddenly a loud knock echoed at the door. David froze. Another knock. Harder this time. His heart stopped. No one comes here this late. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Suffocating. The knock came again. "Mr. Carter." A voice from outside, calm/controlled. David's blood ran cold. "They found me." His eyes started to the bag, then to the door. "Mr. Carter, I know you're inside." The voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority. "Danger." David slowly walked toward the door, each step uncertain. His hand hovered over the handle. "Don't open it." But something inside him said, "You have no choice." He unlocked the door, opened it slightly. A man stood there, tall, sharp suit, rain sliding off his shoulders like it didn't belong on him. His eyes were calm, too calm. "Good evening," the man said. David didn't reply. "May I come in?" David hesitated, then stepped aside. The man entered, looked around briefly, taking in everything. The small space, the worn furniture, the reality of David's life. Then his eyes landed on the bag. Silence. "You found something tonight?" the man said. Not a question, a statement. David's chest tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man smiled faintly. "You're not a good liar, Mr. Carter." David clenched his fists. "What do you want?" The man stepped closer to the table. "That bag doesn't belong to you." David's voice cracked slightly. "Then take it." The man stopped, looked at him, curious. "Just like that?" David nodded. "I don't want trouble." The man studied his face carefully. "Most people wouldn't say that." "I'm not most people." Silence again. The man's gaze softened just a little. "Why didn't you use it?" David hesitated, then looked toward the bedroom. "My son." The man followed his gaze. "What about him?" David's voice broke. "He's dying." The words hung in the air, heavy and real, and unavoidably the man's expression changed. Just slightly. "What's his condition?" "Leukemia." "How much?" David laughed bitterly. "More than I'll ever have." "Tell me." David swallowed. $2 million. Silence. The man exhaled slowly. "That's a coincidence." David frowned. "What?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat, pulled out his phone, typed something, then looked back at David. "Come with me." David stepped back. "No, you don't have a choice. I'm not going anywhere." The man's tone hardened slightly. "This isn't a request." David's eyes filled with anger. "I said no." Silence, tension rising. Then from the bedroom a weak voice. Papa. David's heart dropped. He rushed inside. Ethan was awake, breathing heavily. David knelt beside him. "I'm here. I'm here." The man appeared at the doorway, watching. Quiet. Ethan looked at him, confused. "Who is that?" David hesitated. "Just someone from work." Ethan nodded slowly. Too tired to question, the man stepped closer. "May?" David looked at him, suspicious, but then he nodded. The man looked at Ethan carefully, then asked softly, "How long has he been like this?" David answered quietly, "Months." The man stood there for a moment, thinking. Then he turned to David. "You need to come with me." David shook his head again. "I can't leave him." The man's voice softened. "If you want him to live, you will." Silence. David looked at Ethan, then at the man. Hope and fear collided inside him. "What are you saying?" The man stepped closer. "I'm saying the person who owns that money," he paused, "is the only one who can help you." David's heart started racing. "Why would he help me?" The man looked him straight in the eye. "Because you didn't take it, and just like that." David realized returning the money might be the only way to save his son, but what he didn't know was The man he was about to meet never gave anything for free. Why would a billionaire throw away $2 million like trash? And why was David the only one who didn't take it? The car moved silently through the city. Rain traced slow lines across the tinted windows. Streetlights passed like fading memories. David sat in the back seat. The black duffel bag rested beside him, untouched, unzipped, heavy with more than just money. His fingers tightened against his knees. His thoughts were louder than the storm outside. What if this is a trap? What if I never come back? What if this is the biggest mistake of my life? He glanced at the man sitting in the front seat. Still calm, still unreadable. Who is he? David finally asked. The man didn't turn around. You'll see. That answer didn't help. David looked back at the bag, then out the window, then closed his eyes. Ethan's face appeared instantly. Papa, don't be late. His chest tightened. I won't, he whispered under his breath. The car slowed, turned, then stopped. David opened his eyes. They had arrived. A towering building stood before him. Steel, power, even in the rain. It looked untouchable. The man stepped out, opened David's door. Calm. David hesitated for half a second, then stepped out. The cold air hit him sharp. Real. This wasn't his world. Inside, everything changed. Warm lights, marble floors, soft footsteps. People moved with purpose, with confidence, with control. David felt small, out of place, like a stain in a perfect picture. They walked toward the elevator. No one stopped them. No one questioned them. That alone told David something important. This man has power. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. The man pressed the top floor. Silence. David watched the numbers climb. Each floor felt like a step deeper into something unknown. Why me? David asked suddenly. The man looked at him through the reflection. Because you didn't run? I was scared. Everyone is. Then why bring me here? The man paused. Because fear shows who you really are. The elevator stopped. Doors opened. And David stepped into a world he had only ever seen from below. The top floor, glass walls revealed the entire city. Lights stretched endlessly, like stars trapped on Earth. At the center of it all, a large office. Minimal, clean, powerful. And behind the desk sat a man. Still, silent, watching. Mr. Wolf. The man beside David said quietly. The man at the desk didn't respond immediately. He kept looking at something on the table. A file, a screen, or maybe just thinking. Then slowly he looked up. His eyes met David's. Sharp, deep, unforgiving. Sit. The word wasn't loud, but it carried weight. David didn't move. I prefer to stand, he said, a slight pause. Then a faint smile appeared on Wolf's face. Interesting? He leaned back in his chair, studying David like a puzzle. You found something tonight. David didn't answer. You brought it with you. Still silence. Wolf tapped his fingers lightly on the desk. Open it. David hesitated, then slowly placed the bag on the desk, unzipped it. The money revealed itself again. Cold, precise, tempting. Wolf glanced at it briefly, then back at David. You opened it earlier? Yes. You counted it? No. Why not? David took a breath. Because it wasn't mine. Silence filled the room. Not empty silence. Heavy silence. Wolf's eyes didn't move. You're telling me you found $2 million? He leaned forward slightly. And you didn't take a single dollar? David's voice was steady now. My son is dying. A flicker of something passed through Wolf's eyes. Then why are you here? David swallowed. Because I don't want to lose him, and I don't want to lose myself. That line hung in the air. Different, unexpected. Wolf leaned back again. For 20 years, he said slowly. I've been running this company. Davy said nothing. And for 20 years, Wolf continued. I've been testing people. David frowned. Testing? Wolf gestured toward the bag. That money wasn't lost. David's heart skipped. It was placed. The room felt smaller suddenly. You're saying? Yes, Wolf interrupted calmly. I put it there. David's mind struggled to process it. Why? Wolf stood up, walked slowly toward the window. It's to find someone who can't be bought. David stared at him. And you do this by throwing millions into trash. Wolf turned slightly. Money reveals truth faster than anything else. David's jaw tightened. And what truth did you expect to find? Wolf looked directly at him. Greed. A pause. Desperation. Another pause. Or honesty. The word echoed. David let out a quiet breath. And I passed your test. Wolf didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked back to the desk, looked at the bag, then at David. You're the first. The words hit harder than expected. First. What? First person. Who didn't take it? David blinked. That's not possible, it is. How many people? Wolf smiled faintly. Enough. Silence again. David looked at the money, then at Wolf. So what now? Wolf studied him carefully. Now I decide what you're worth. The words felt sharp. I'm not here to be valued, David said quietly. I'm here for my son. Wolf's expression shifted. Just slightly. Tell me about him. David hesitated. There was something in Wolf's tone. Felt different now. Less cold. More human. So he spoke. About Ethan. His laughter, his dreams, his love for running, his fear of needles, his question every night. Will I get better? David's voice cracked. He believes me. Every time I say yes. Silence for the first time. Wolf didn't interrupt. Didn't analyze. Didn't judge. He just listened. When David finished, the room felt heavier. Wolf turned away. Walked slowly to his desk. Pressed a button. Prepare a transfer, he said. David's heart started pounding. 2 million. Everything stopped. To City General Hospital. David stepped forward. What? Wolf looked at him. He passed the test. Tears filled David's eyes instantly. You're serious? Wolf nodded once. Your son gets the surgery. David couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. All the weight he had been carrying started to break. Why, he whispered. Wolf looked at him. Long, deep. Because once, he said quietly, I failed. David froze. What do you mean? Wolf didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the window again. Looked out at the city. Lights. Power. Everything he owned. And yet, something felt missing. When I was young, he began slowly. I was like you. David listened carefully. Poor. Disparity. A pause. My son was sick. David's breath caught. And one day, Wolf continued. I found money. Silence filled the room. Just like you did. David felt something shift inside him. And I kept it. The words landed heavy. My son lived, Wolf said. But I lost something I never got back. David whispered what? Wolf turned. Eyes darker now. Myself. The room went quiet again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was real. 2 men. 2 fathers. 2 choices. Standing in the same moment. Years apart. Wolf walked closer. I built everything you see, he said. But none of it ever filled that gap. David swallowed. So you created this test. To find someone who wouldn't repeat my mistake. A long pause, and now you found him. David looked down, then back at Wolf. I didn't do anything special. Wolf shook his head. No, you did something rare. Soft music rises, emotional shift, but just as the moment settled, a voice echoed from the doorway. Sir, there's a problem. Both men turned. The assistant looked nervous. What is it? Wolf asked. The transfer. David's heart skipped. What about it? Wolf's voice sharpened. The assistant hesitated. It's been flagged. Silence. By who? Wolf asked coldly. The assistant swallowed. The internal audit and Danana audit. And he paused. Federal authorities. David's blood ran cold. What does that mean? He asked. The assistant looked at him, then back at Wolf. It means this money, a pause, was never supposed to leave the system. And in that moment, David realized the money that could save his son might be connected to something far bigger, something dangerous, and walking away was no longer an option. The money didn't just save his son, it exposed a truth so dangerous, it could destroy everything. Silence, heavy, suffocating. David stood frozen. The assistant's words echoed in his head like a warning that refused to fade. It's been flagged. By internal audit and federal authorities. The room felt colder, smaller, like the walls were closing in. David looked at Wolf. His expression had changed. No longer calm, no longer in control. Explain, Wolf said quietly. But beneath that calm, there was steel. The assistant swallowed. Sir, the account you used for the transfer, he hesitated. It's under investigation. A long pause. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Since when? A few weeks. David's heart pounded harder. Weeks. That meant this had started before the test, before the bag, before everything. What kind of investigation? Wolf asked. The assistant looked down briefly. Financial irregularities? Offshore accounts? Unregistered movements of funds? David felt his stomach drop. This money, he whispered. It's illegal. The assistant didn't answer. Wolf did. No, his voice was firm, sharp. This money is mine. But something in his tone wasn't as certain as before. David stepped back slightly. You said it was a test. It was. Then why is it being investigated? Wolf didn't respond immediately. For the first time, he looked unsure, not weak, but human. Leave, as Wolf said to the assistant. But sir, now. The assistant nodded quickly, left the room, door closed. Silence returned. David stared at Wolf. You knew? David said quietly. Wolf turned to him. I suspected. That's not the same thing. No, Wolf admitted. It's worse. David ran a hand over his face. My son, he whispered. Everything came back to that. Always. I don't care about your company, your money, your past. His voice trembled. I just need to save him. Wolf looked at him, more carefully, and he will. David shook his head. Oh, if the money is frozen, it won't be. David frowned. What do you mean? Wolf walked to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a thin file, placed it on the table. Because the truth hasn't come out yet. David hesitated. What truth? Wolf opened the file. Photos, documents, transactions, names. This, Wolf said slowly, isn't just about money. David stepped closer. Well then, what is it about? Wolf looked at him. Betrayal. Someone inside my company, Wolf continued, has been moving money without my knowledge. David's chest tightened. How much? Wolf's jaw clenched. Enough to destroy everything. David looked at the file again. And the bag was part of it. A realization hit David. You used me. Wolf didn't deny it. I used the situation. That's the same thing. Not entirely. David laughed bitterly. You threw illegal money in a dumpster and waited to see who would take it. Yes, and if I had taken it, Wolf paused, then you would have proven my point. David stared at him. Why, what point is that? That most people choose themselves over everything else. Silence. David's voice lowered. And what about you? That question lingered. Wolf didn't answer immediately, because deep down, he already knew. Years ago, Wolf said quietly, I told you. I made a choice. David nodded. You kept the money. Yes, and I lost who I was. A long pause, but this time. Wolf looked at David. I won't. David studied him carefully, trying to understand, trying to believe. So what happens now? Wolf closed the file. Now we fix this. How by exposing the truth? David's heart skipped, and my son, Wolf stepped closer. Comes first. Morning light broke through the windows. Soft, gentle, almost hopeful. David stood outside Ethan's room, phone in hand. Hello, yes. His voice was low. Yes, prepare everything. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath when he entered. Ethan smiled weakly. Papa. David walked to him, held his hand. I told you, champ, he whispered. You're going to be okay. Ethan looked at him. Really? This time? David didn't hesitate. Yes, because now, for the first time, it felt true. Days passed. Fast, tense, unpredictable. Wolf moved quickly, quietly. Accounts reviewed, names uncovered, and one name kept appearing. Daniel Reeves. David sat across from Wolf. The file was opened again. Chief Financial Officer, Wolf said. David frowned. Your right-hand man. Wolf nodded. For 12 years. Silence. Why would he do this? David asked. Wolf's expression darkened. Because power changes people. Seeing confrontation, Reeves stood in the office. Calm, collected. You wanted to see me? Wolf looked at him. No emotion. Yes. The file slid across the table. Reeves glanced at it, then smiled. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. David's eyes widened. You're not even denying it. Reeves shrugged. Why would I? Wolf stepped forward. You stole from me. Reeves chuckled. No, I outgrew you. Silence, sharp, dangerous. You built this empire. Reeves continued. But you forgot one thing. And what's that? Wolf asked. Reeves smirked. That loyalty has an expiration date. David felt the tension rise. You used me, Wolf said quietly. Reeves tilted his head. Just like you used everyone else. That hit harder than expected. Because it wasn't entirely wrong. Scene breaking point, the truth spread quickly. Investigations opened, accounts unlocked, and the money was cleared. David stood in the hospital hallway, phone in hand, tears in his eyes. It's approved, he whispered. The surgery, it's happening. He leaned against the wall, overwhelmed. For weeks he had been fighting, and now, finally, a door had opened. Hours felt like years. David sat outside the operation room, hands shaking, eyes fixed on the red light. Stay strong, he whispered. Time moved slowly, painfully, until the light turned off. The doctor stepped out. David stood instantly. Well, he asked. The doctor smiled. It was successful. Everything stopped. Then everything came back. David broke down. Tears, relief, gratitude, all at once. Sunlight, warm, peaceful, a pup. Ethan ran across the grass, laughing. Papa, watch this. David smiled. I'm watching. Ethan ran faster, stronger, alive. David sat on the bench, watching him. Wolf sat beside him, quiet. He did good, Wolf said. David shook his head. No, he smiled softly. I just did what was right. A pause. That's what makes it rare, Wolf replied. Ethan ran back, breathing fast, smiling wide. Papa. David pulled him close. Yes, chap. Ethan looked up. Why are you smiling so much today? David laughed softly. Because I got my world back. Final line, slow, emotional whisper. Sometimes life tests you, not to break you, but to show you who you truly are. When everything is at stake, doing the right thing is the hardest choice, but also the most powerful one.